Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host and partner, Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian. Today, we've got an awesome guest. So excited and a little apprehensive because this guy has been out there blogging. He's got a podcast. He's a single dad of three children on the autism spectrum. But more importantly, he's an amazing guy with fantastic energy. And just an amazing warrior out there making a difference in the special needs community. So we're very excited to have our guest today, Mr. Rob Gorski. So hang in there for another episode of Just Two Dads. Hello, everybody. I am Brian Altunian again with my partner in Thrive, Mr. Shawn Francis. So if you're catching us live on Facebook, hello, welcome. Please put some comments in the comment section. Those can get up on the screen for our guest. If you're hearing us on podcasts after the fact, actually, if you're seeing us on podcasts after the fact, you catch us on our YouTube channel. I've screwed it up already. See, too much pressure, Rob. You're catching us on podcast outlets, wherever. Please comment, send us notes. We want to hear if there's a topic you'd like us to cover or discuss. And if you're hearing us at WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, we say hello and welcome to our family down there. And on Roku channel, Power Media. Hello, everybody. We've been doing this now for a couple of years. This is episode number 92, I believe, Just Two Dads. So we're fired up to be having this conversation today. You're going to be absolutely amazed when you hear the story about Rob Gorski, our guest today. So before we jump to Rob, I'm just going to throw it over to Shawn and say hello, Shawn. And how you doing today? I know you had a little incident on your way home this morning already. So throw that right there. Gotcha.
I'm doing great. You know, it's nice to just let people know that, we're all trying to get through this thing called life and trying to strive in every way that we can. I had a little bit of a experience where I had a rock hit my windshield. It's not the worst thing, but I like to say our biggest nightmares are other people's dreams. So I am thankful, blessed, and grateful to be here today. And I am exceptionally glad for the guest that we have today. There's good and bad of social media. This guy's an example of just the good in social media. I saw his Instagram account and reached out to him a couple of times, and we started talking. And that is none other than the Autism Dad, Rob Gorski. Rob, welcome to Just Two Dads.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's kind of like, where do we begin? So a single dad of three boys on the autism spectrum. That alone that's not a mouthful. That is the mental dietary requirement of caloric intake. I mean, it's just.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, well, but that's perspective too. That literally just creeped into my head. Never thought of that before. But you haven't thought of that before because you're just doing what you do. You're just being you. And that's, I think, the thing that is so amazing about us as human beings and the human experience is that we're so focused on just doing what we do, especially if we're trying to get from point A to point B. Maybe even looking to thrive, we're not even thinking that, I might actually inspire somebody. Like, there's no thought of that. You're just like, I'm trying to make the best out of my situation. But before we get to where you are now, because you're a blogger, you've got a successful podcast, you've started an organization, the Autism Dad and LLC. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about how you turn a challenge into an opportunity, inspire people, turn it into a business, all those different things. But, let's begin with the beginning. You probably just see yourself as a guy, knowing you as I do. You don't see yourself as the hero that you are, but you're wrong, because you are a hero, and all heroes have powers, and our superpowers, come from our origin. So let's start with that and talk about, I know you're from Ohio. Let's talk a little bit about how everything started out with you, how you were raised, where you're from, and how that affects how you deal with the challenges put before you.
I born and raised in Canton, Ohio, never really escaped. Gravity strong. I'm the oldest of six. I have 4 boys and 2 girls, and my parents, I think, hit their 46th anniversary in May.
Wow.
And, we were just, I don't know, I guess the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. In my case, like my parents raised all of us to be just kind and like compassionate, like good humans, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of thing that like you would hope would just be kind of like a default setting for people, but doesn't.
It's amazing.
Doesn't end up being that way
No.
all the time. But like we grew up, and my dad worked multiple jobs to send us to Catholic school was a big thing for them, and I just grew up watching him work really hard to take care of all of us. And my mom worked. I mean, being a stay-at-home mom to 6 kids is a lot of work. So we'll just say arguably a harder job, much harder job.
Yeah,
I agree.
And, but they were always there for us. We always had what we needed, maybe not everything that we wanted, but I think that it kind of helps shape you in a way that, you don't take things for granted, and you never really learn to expect anything. You work for the stuff that you have. And, my dad always, despite how busy he was, he always made sure like he was like coaching our soccer teams and scouting stuff and all that kind of stuff. So he stayed very involved in all of that, and fast forward 43 years, I guess. And, they live, I don't know, it's like 4 miles down the road from where I'm at now. And everybody's really close, and they're always there. On most days I'm like walking with my mom in the morning at the park. And even at 43, like it's important, to keep that going. It's just one of my favorite things to do is just kind of, talk
Love
to them.
that.
Yeah. So I have a really good support system, which is the only way I've been able to survive, I think, as long as I have.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
No, it does.
Better way
It
to get
does.
started.
It does.
Yeah, for sure.
It's great. So, so let's move forward. We're talking about, that generally speaking, the impact your family's had, a fantastic support system. Tell us a little bit about high school, college, and your path to marriage, if you will.
Yeah. So I went to St. Thomas Aquinas in high school. Not that you know what that is, but it's one of the towns.
I know the name though, because I don't know if there's a university by that name or if there's another school.
There probably is. I think there's a number of them actually. Like if you try and look it up, there's like 1,000.
Whole list. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in a Catholic school, a parochial school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I went to high school, and I never really got in trouble. I guess good for me. My parents did well. And I started working when I was in high school and played soccer and stuff like that most of my life. And when I left high school, I ended up going to Walsh University, which is still in the Canton area. And studied my goal at the time was to study forensic psychology. I wanted to be like a criminal profiler. And cool. I had to, you couldn't put that degree together down there. So I had to piece some things together there and then move like to New York for John Jay College. But while I was waiting for a class to open up, I took an EMT class because I thought, hey, that'd be useful if something happens, right?
Yeah.
And I fell in love with that, and I left college and went into the fire department, became a medic, and worked that for a number of years. Got hurt and kind of burned out, and had to walk away from that. But then that takes me into that sort of overlaps where I got married and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's not a smooth transition, guys.
It's smooth. It's as smooth as
life.
As life and need be. So if you will, at this point, then tell us about, both your marriage and in and fatherhood, as those things kind of come together and begin, if you will.
Sure. I met my now ex-wife. It was 2001, shortly after, actually right before September 11th. And she had a 12-month-old son from a previous marriage. And, we just sort of met and connected, and I bonded. Gavin is his name. And I bonded with him real fast. And, we ended up getting married a few years later. Just raised Gavin as my own, until we ended up having 2 kids of our own. And, yeah, I mean, I guess like the autism diagnoses came, along that path. But it ultimately ended in divorce in 2021 was when it was finally
finalized.
COVID delayed everything. Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. No, it's okay. So you met her. She had Gavin was 12 months old at the time. How old was Gavin when he was diagnosed?
So it's 2005 when he was diagnosed. So he was a millennial baby born in 2000, January 18th, 2000. So he was almost a New Year's millennial baby. So he would have been about 5 years old. And his story is like really different. And I was just talking about this with Eileen Lamb on my last episode. He has regressive autism. So like he developed typically, like hit all his milestones. Nobody knew anything was wrong or different. And then I remember like around his 4th birthday, it felt like we put him to bed, Gavin. And then when he woke up, he was like a completely different person. Like,
wow.
Like so much so that you start kind of entertaining these weird ideas that like someone came down and like beamed him out in the middle of the night and like tried to leave a clone behind, but it was just so different that you couldn't recognize him.
Right.
Like he looked the same, but all of his personality traits were different. His likes and dislikes changed. He was quiet. He didn't like to be touched. He didn't give hugs. Like, I mean, it was so dramatic that like we knew like something's not right, and it just sort of started us down that path.
We just had a guest on our podcast a couple of weeks ago whose child had the same thing, a regressive, looks like developing normally, and then all of a sudden some regression, and it's a very noticeable difference. And as parents, we know our kids so well that if there's something off, we know that there's something off. Mm-hmm. So you went to a neurologist. I'm assuming you went to a neurologist to get a
became trying to rule out everything that it could be so that you could figure out what it isn't. Figure out what it isn't so you can figure out what it is. And, ultimately it led to a diagnosis of autism in 2005. But he presents atypically for even regressive autism. So like he would gain skills. That was the other thing he lost, was most of the skills that he had mastered, like tying his shoes and like lots of like daily life kind of things that he was already doing. Right. And, sometimes he would gain new skills and he would lose them. And we would have to like work really hard and be really repetitive to kind of help him gain them back. And then times he would seem like he plateaued and everything was fine. And then all of a sudden we would have another
setback.
And there's no rhyme and reason for it. And it kind of continued that way until he was probably in his later teens, and so you just kind of never knew what you were going to see. And I think he was 16, and he was officially diagnosed with childhood disintegrative disorder, which is, I don't think it's in the DSM anymore, but it was like the rarest form of autism where they develop typically and then they regress.
And what is it called again?
Childhood disintegrative disorder.
Wow.
Disintegrative disorder. Never heard of that.
It's like it's not Welling syndrome or something, but there's another name for it. I can't remember what they call it.
And
Let
is
me
that
ask
due
you
to,
this.
to genetics?
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Sean.
Go ahead,
I was
Brian.
just saying,
No, you go
is
ahead,
that a
Brian.
genetics? Is that like a marker on a gene?
No. Well, I have no idea. He has had every genetic workup that he can have. Nothing ever comes out. Everything is normal, which is
So
Wow.
bizarre.
frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good, right? It's good that there isn't like some genetic abnormality that isn't that could make it worse for him. But it's frustrating in the sense that like you can't figure out like what happened, you know, and there's a feeling of powerlessness when you don't know what you're battling against, I guess, if that makes sense.
You know, yeah, that's one thing we often talk about. You know, I think, Brian and I, our primary work is in financial services, and when we do our events and we talk about concepts and products and planning for the future and all that kind of stuff, before we get into that and we talk about our story. In Brian's case, his daughter was diagnosed with microcephaly. In my case, my son Elijah was diagnosed with autism. But the one thing we talk about, because all of us in this community have it in common, is the day of diagnosis. And in your case, it's just completely different from something not being right at a certain age. And I don't know. This is you're going about your business, and then the rug is snatched out from underneath you, and you can't figure out how. So the other thing is, at birth or sometime shortly after that, in a diagnosis of a different kind, there's a mourning period that takes place because you're mourning the loss of the child that you expected to have.
Mm-hmm.
And the hope is that you transition then to the complete embrace and acceptance of the child that you do have.
Mm-hmm.
In your case, with childhood disintegrative disorder, you're talking about having the wool pulled over your eyes. So there's no mourning because it's just celebration because you have like a normal, healthy child.
Yep.
And then it's sudden. That's completely different. So that's in Gavin's situation. So and if you don't mind me asking,
Sure.
You met your wife. She had Gavin already. Was Gavin's biological father involved in the picture, in any way, shape, or form at all?
No, there was a lengthy court thing with that. There was a lot of physical abuse and things like that, and the custody battle between it ultimately he was unfit, and it came down to her and the paternal grandparents. Yeah, paternal grandparents. And I mean, there was like case law, and we hit the Ohio Supreme Court at one point for appeals and stuff. I mean, it lasted about, I don't know, 8 years, something like that. But ultimately, Gavin was protected, and his dad finally decided to walk away because he was just kind of being used as a pawn. He didn't want anything to do with Gavin, and he was very honest about that. So, but the grandparents were sort of the driving force, and it sucks because like they were using, the kids become weapons, right? And
For sure.
you do everything you can to do things the right way, and it's not how the system works a lot of times, right? Like it's the people who are working the system that sometimes do the best. But it took a long time. But we had a lot of professionals and social workers and guardian ad litems, and that were on Gavin's side, and ultimately it worked. And there's been no contact for, I don't know. I adopted him successfully when he was, I say it's like 10. We were just debating this the other day. 10 maybe.
And that's a perfect place to pick up on my next point, which is there's such a level of relatability here in that you're not looking to have a light shined upon you. But if somebody appreciates your attempt to shine a light on other people and lift them up, you appreciate that. So I'm going to shine a light where you're not going to shine it, which is upon yourself. Because when I met my wife, she had her daughters from her previous marriage. We eventually then later became legal guardians to her sister's 4 children. So having had a similar experience in terms of meeting someone, stepping up and stepping into that role, I can relate to that. And if I didn't have that experience, I still would just think that that's so, I don't even know if I want to say commendable of you, because it's not something charitable. You fell in love. You fell in love with her, and you fell in love with her child. And that's incredible and fantastic. And the world needs more of that. And I say that from a selfish perspective, as much of an appreciative one. So
excuse me for 1 second. This is real life. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Who is it? Did you not know that I'm in a meeting? Remember?
Yeah, I know that. I need to take a COVID test.
Oh my God. Can you please just not do this right now?
No,
I understand. Out. We'll talk about it when I'm done. I'm already aware.
This is the perfect show for
It's the best.
that to take place, because if we, and again, that's where my appreciation comes in for how we do this. And as we grow and change, that's probably one of the things that's not going to change about how we do this. Because if you're on somebody else's show, you'd have to like, can we stop for a second? You'd stop, you'd edit. We don't do that. This show is real life.
I used to, every time I was recording an episode on my end, without fail, like they knew that I was doing this, and they would walk in, or they would knock on the door for things that just really, in my view, didn't matter in the moment. And I used to just get like, I was kind of frustrated with it. And so I would edit it all out. And then someone once, while we were recording, someone told me once, they're like, you should totally leave that in, because that just makes me feel better, because, my daughter interrupted, and I'm like, that's actually, we'll just roll with that, because
Yes.
it's real life. This was in the throes of COVID, where people were like working from home for the first time. And
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
that CNN reporter whose child storms in while he's actually doing a live report is sort of indicative of what happens. And as we've in this hybrid work from home world, like that is real life, especially if you have children that have, they have needs. They need to be, in some cases that need has to be fulfilled immediately. So
apparently for him, it's a COVID test.
Yeah, it's a COVID test. Okay. There you go.
So let's continue to keep moving, because I think the better the conversation is, the faster the time goes. And so,
because I was going to ask the
Brian.
question: how old was Gavin when your other 2 boys were born and then also diagnosed? How
Right.
that?
Gavin. Okay, so Elliot was born in 2006.
So
Gavin would have been 6, and then that's really easy actually, because he was a 2000 baby. Emmett was born in 2008, so he was 8.
Okay, got it. And when were they diagnosed, and what did you notice?
Diagnosed, like with Emmett, he was nonverbal for the first 4 years of his life, and we thought that he was deaf. He failed all his hearing screenings, and we were teaching him sign language and stuff like that. And the final part of the diagnostic process for the hearing impairment was an ABR, where they put the electrodes on his head and sedate him and check to see if the brain is actually processing sound. And he was fine. I'm like, oh, he's just ignoring you. He's probably autistic. And we're like, wow, because that's not what we thought, and very, very different than what his brother presented with. So it didn't occur to us that you can have the same diagnosis, but be profoundly, like, present in a profoundly different way. And so we didn't notice it with him. And then we did once we went down that path. And then with my middle child, Elliot, I didn't see it, because compared to his brothers, didn't look like there was anything going on until like preschool orientation, and he's in a classroom full of neurotypical kids, and it became very obvious to me. Like I ended up like breaking down and having to walk out of the school to like not make a scene, because it just hit me like a freight train in that moment. Was like, oh my God, like how did I miss this? How did I not see this? And it's just because, I mean, I guess you probably don't want to see it to some extent, but you're comparing him to 2 other people who are different, and I think that's what's so confusing and misleading about having so many unique variations under one umbrella term. And it makes it hard for people to recognize the differences.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
everybody's just as unique as anybody else, and their symptoms are different, and their life challenges and their strengths and everything. It's different, you know,
Yeah.
commonalities, but mostly different.
I know Shawn talked about my oldest daughter, whose initial diagnosis was microcephaly. Well, microcephaly just means micro, small, cephaly, head, small head, right? Which doesn't really mean anything except that it's sort of an overlying, description of children who have learning disabilities or developmental delays have their brain, their skulls develop, slower than the neurotypical. And so again, like what you're saying, at some point, autism has become a catch-all phrase for a number of, of issues along that scale. So, you're to your point, like you can see it in one child, you can see it in the other child, and you don't see it. And I think you're right. I think a lot of parents, even with neurotypical children, don't want to see that they have issues with their children. But, then it hits you and you're like, oh, and I don't know, just having two children with issues, does that make you better suited to handle when a third one is diagnosed?
And the thing is like, I don't know anything, and diagnosis didn't change anything. It just put like a face to a name, right? Like it just sort of
a label on it.
A better understanding of what you're dealing with. So you have a direction to go in, and then services open up because there's no help until you have a diagnosis.
Right.
Right.
But they're still the exact same person they were before the diagnosis. They're still the exact same person they were after the diagnosis. It's just context. And so like, certain behaviors become less frustrating because you understand that they're not doing it on purpose. It's right. It's you start kind of settling in and figuring out a path that you can sustain, going forward. And there's a lot of guilt for not, I had a lot of guilt for not recognizing things before I did, because like early intervention is super important. And, preschool is kind of a later time, for younger kids to be diagnosed, I think. And, and the other thing, when we were talking about Gavin, and I was just talking about this with Eileen Lamb, and one of the things that is really, really hard for the families that go through that is that you grieve as though you lost a child, which conceptually doesn't make any sense to most people because you still have your child, right? But you still have what looks to be the same child, but everything is different,
Right.
And you grieve that. And then if you openly grieve that, then you're, criticized or attacked for grieving someone that you still have, right? It's a very, very difficult place to be, and a very, very difficult place to try and like bounce back from. Yeah. But then you just learn to embrace the child that's there. And like, I only know the Gavin now. I mean, he's been the same Gavin for 15 years or something. Like,
yeah, you're judged by people that are further away from walking in your shoes than they will ever be. And that's why grace is important, because you got to be allowed to grieve so that you can get to full acceptance for loving them for who they are.
Yeah. And it's a subset in the autism community that really is aggressive when it comes to parents and interventions and things like that. And if you grieve after diagnosis, that's like viewed as a negative thing. But most people don't understand. I mean, you're human. You grieve the loss of what you thought life was going to be like, or what path you thought your child was going to be on for themselves. Right. And you know what I mean? It's that's human.
Well, and it's funny because that's how quickly we judge. Most people have a gap of some kind between the life that they wanted to have and the one that they do have.
Yep.
For some people, the gap is bigger than others, but everybody is grieving that. Some people just mask it and they're not even dealing with it. So that's a whole, that's another topic, but yet it's the same thing. And it's also an example of how we have more in common than we do otherwise. Let me ask you this. So at this point, you're still married. I have the benefit of being part of an amazing team with my wife. I know what it's like to work as a team and as a unit, be yoked together to overcome life's obstacles, as well as, those that come with diagnosis. Would you say at this point, between you and your now ex-wife, that you guys were, were you at any point a good, a solid team?
Yeah. Yeah. She spearheaded the teaching him sign language. I mean, she was very different back then. And, the kids we were all very lucky, for the person that she was. We were a good team. I mean, we definitely were, we played to each other's strengths. We picked up slack for the other person. I mean, I don't think it's always ever bad,
Right.
But.
And you don't have to get into as much detail or as you want to in terms of what changed.
People change. And I think mental health, emotional issues can drive people into different directions. And you can reach a point where some people just want a different life.
Yeah.
And
they just go find it. And
we always talk about that, a diagnosis will either bring people, a couple closer together, or, but even in those cases, when it does bring you closer together, it's still going to challenge you. It's like a muscle, you're going to, but in many cases, that's why within our community, a lot of marriages don't survive.
Yeah.
So that's not a strange thing. So if you can, then what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I was going to say, people. I did a reel about this because I have a support group for families, and one of the questions that I always get is like, does autism lead to divorce in families? And sure it can, right? Like anything can, and humans aren't super creative when it comes to destroying marriages and relationships, right? It's like one of three things usually, and. Whether you're a special needs family or not, it's not any different. But I think to blame it on autism or to blame it on a special needs child is not accurate or fair. I think it's not so much what you're dealing with, but how you choose to deal with it together that'll dictate whether you like pull through that or you don't, and for lots of people, they find that path where it keeps them close and tighter together, and they forge through everything. And some people lose their way, but I wouldn't blame it on autism or any of those challenges. It tends to be
usually a factor, factor of many. Just the thing that people highlight or easy to point to.
Right. So totally at this point, chronologically, you're, so you've got 3 boys all diagnosed.
Yeah.
One whom you've adopted.
Yeah.
2 who are yours biologically, and you find yourself all of a sudden as a single parent.
Yeah, that was 2014 originally.
Okay. All right.
Well, and chronologically, prior to that, so just to get prior to that, you started to blog about your journey at some point, right?
When that would have been.
You started talking about that.
Yeah, that was about 2010. I think it's about 2010.
Okay.
And I was really struggling with I felt really helpless because like I couldn't a fixer, right? I was a medic still at the time. And like and dads, right? They just want to fix things.
Yeah,
guys,
that's our job.
It's broken. Let's fix it.
Right.
Not that he was broken, but like trying to find a path to get him what he needs to succeed. Yeah. And she was like, you should just like start a journal and like write all this stuff down so that you can just kind of put it out there and let it and walk away from it. And I was like, I don't do it. Like I just learned I have ADHD, which is probably why I didn't want to like write it down on paper. It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So she's like, well, let's just start like a blog and just write about it, cause you can type it up from your phone. I could have the app on my phone, which I was totally engaged with. And that was cool for me. It was like, it's totally private. No one's ever going to read it. And I was like, okay, so we set up a WordPress thing, and I just started. I remember the first. I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but I know that it was not safe for human consumption, and you just say all the things.
Vomited.
Yeah, you
mom
sort
and
of
everything
work
you're
on it.
feeling.
And you're saying all the things that are in your head that you just keep to yourself because you're like, nobody wants to know that I'm thinking that,
Yeah.
but it's normal, right? It's like, it's a human thing. And we're not talking like bad things, just like you're angry or you're frustrated or you're resentful or you're struggling to deal with this, or you, like in my case, like I missed the kid that I raised for the first 4 years, or 3 years. And I started getting comments and I'm like, how are they commenting if nobody can read this? And it turned into this, it wasn't private and parents found it because I sort of started, there was a vacuum, where there was no information. And so people would start looking up autism and they would stumble across, it was called Lost and Tired at the time. And which I thought was a really interesting name because it really kind of like hit home for me at the time. But
Yeah.
people started gravitating to it. Parents started gravitating to it. And it was like they were reading the things that they were thinking and feeling and learning for the first time that they weren't the only ones thinking and feeling those things. They felt isolated. And so it just kind of evolved into this sort of therapeutic experience for me because it was helpful to just write everything down and walk away from it. And it helped other parents who were either, coming kind of behind me on the journey, kind of lighting that path. And even people who've been doing it for a long time, who've just become isolated, that forget or don't know that there's other people out there who are dealing with, similar things. And then it felt like I was bringing something positive out of all of the struggle and the challenges that we were dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And then at what point did it transition to what you currently have now as the Autism Dad? Or was there
when my ex-wife left, she left twice. And so the first time in 2014, she came back a couple years later. We reconciled because I was, like, do what you think is right in the moment. And, I wanted to put my family together. And, I've been raising the kids by myself for that period of time. And like, it's not easy, and so I thought, okay, we can, do this. And, but during that period of time, I had transitioned from Lost and Tired to the Autism Dad because I kind of felt like the whole journey had changed and it's a different story. And
Right.
I was getting a lot of flack for Lost and Tired because people thought it was like negative or like the title was negative, whatever. But, so I decided I'm going to try and just sort of do something that is maybe less focused on my kids because as they get older, privacy is a thing, and more focused maybe on like my experience rather than just sort of sharing what my kids are going through. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how that got started.
Gotcha. And you've been acknowledged and recognized. I mean, you've had even in the UK, like around the world, like people have acknowledged you. How does that all? Just same thing, just sort of stumbled upon you. Did you were you doing events? Were you how did that all happen?
They just find me. I think started. I have been told, okay, very humbly, I'm saying this. I don't like talking about myself.
we get that.
Yeah, very humbly. Like I sort of started that whole movement of parents sort of like talking about the challenges, especially for dads at least. Of talking openly about what raising an autistic child is like, or just, there was a lot of mom bloggers at that time and doing amazing things, but there weren't dads out there doing that. And
for sure.
So I just sort of kind of filled a void. I just kind of fell into it, I guess, is more of what it was. And I was going through a lot, and I'm a talker, so lots of things that I was writing, and it was always helpful to people, I guess. And, it just sort of grew from that. And the internet, right? It's not local. So anybody from anywhere can read it.
Yep.
And word of mouth and people sharing and things like that kind of just spread the word.
Well, what's interesting is that as that has come, by the way, Shawn and I thought that we started the whole dad thing, but that's okay. We'll give it up to you. We understand.
There's still not that many of us out there.
No, actually,
There's not many.
But the great thing about what's happening now, and as as information progresses, now you've got social media. And so
Yeah.
as Shawn found you on Instagram, and we follow you and, your posts, and now really it's like before you were like speaking your blog into your phone. Now you're like live on camera and like in the moment. And so it really is amazing to see how that's progressed. And now that you've got significant following, how many episodes do you think you have done over the years?
Podcast, I think I'm like maybe 3 or 4 ahead of you guys. So
Okay.
I don't think I've hit 100 yet. Well, it's season 4, episode 14. And like the first season was really short because I was just sort of learning. Don't ever go back and listen to season 1.
We said the same thing, by the way.
Maybe
I have a T-shirt that says that. Don't ever listen to season.
don't ever
episode
listen to-
1.
maybe just like start at like season 3. I can live with that. But I think like season 3 was 52 episodes.
Yeah.
52 episodes, and then
It's a lot. It's a lot.
and
See,
then
we're so unique. We don't even have seasons. We've just been running through.
Yeah,
well,
right
people
through
do. Some people do like a seasonal thing, and some people do just straight episodes. I kind of wish I had just done straight episodes, but I don't know how to like seamlessly sort of transition over to that. But I just run it calendar year, right? That's what I was doing. So I just figured 2021 was season 4, 2022 will be season 5, and I try to do an episode a week, and it doesn't always work.
It's just you. So,
it's just
course.
it's me, and that's the hard thing. Is like I know I could be doing so much better than what I'm doing, but I don't know enough, right? So like,
well,
I'm
two
learning.
things. The one, you're doing a great job. 2, you
That's
don't
amazing.
yet have the benefit of having some crazy cuckoo friend like I do to do it with.
Right.
Well, that's true.
Wait,
I
what?
work.
We have that.
you
You've
guys
got a
know-
crazy cuckoo friend too, so it's okay, Brian.
Do you guys know
right.
Joel Manzer?
Why does
Joel
his name sound
Manzer-
familiar?
Yeah, his name sounds
I think
familiar,
we've talked about him before. He has Autism is his thing, and he and I had started podcasting. We kind of had a brief period of like where we were doing it together, and then scheduling issues kind of broke that apart. And so we just, in fact, he and I are recording another one on Friday, but he's an awesome guy, and he does his own podcast now, and I just sort of started my own because we kind of share differently. He's more private with some of these things, and I'm just kind of like, whatever, like we'll just leave it all out there. Not everybody is able to do that or comfortable doing that, and that's okay. He does a really good job at what he does. And but like you said, like I'm at a point where like I'm limited by the fact that I'm one person, and trying to manage everything, like that's sort of why like all those little tricks, like we were talking about calendar stuff and whatever earlier. I automate as much as I possibly can, and the only thing that I really do manually is all of the post-production, because I am so picky about that. And
You're gonna hate this episode.
oh no, it's okay. Well, because I would rather do this because it's real and it's authentic. I just get like super self-conscious, and I when you're playing something back, you don't realize how many times you say and but.
Yeah.
I'll have a 30-minute episode of my podcast, right? People's like, 30 minutes, how hard can that be? There's like 200 edits in 30 minutes. So like a 30-minute episode will take me hours and hours and hours to go through, because it's like you play it back in real time and you make the changes in real time. Then you go back a little bit to make sure that it's smooth and you won't notice like, blending the audio together and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah, we do that too. But it's usually me just calling up Shawn and telling Shawn all the things he did wrong on the episode. That's
there you
usually
go.
how it
Yeah,
occurs for
because
us.
ordinarily I would be one to go back and look at myself and be my own worst critic and critique, and
But
for
you
the
had
sake of
Brian.
improvement.
Get
But
Brian to do it for you.
and that's why that works, because I don't listen to go back and listen to episodes from beginning to end half as much. When I was in music and stuff like that, and I recorded the demos or songs I'd listen to it from backward and forward, and I could have done that better. How can I improve this? I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm thinking, 1, I got Brian, 2, it's out there. I can't I'm not gonna pull it off the air. So when it's out, it's out.
Mhm.
And there's pros and cons to it, because it also, builds confidence and everything. So, man, this is really flying by. It always does, but it seems even faster today. So you've got the Autism Dad, which is,
Which, by the way, is an
podcast.
amazing website. Considering you do everything by yourself, Rob. Seriously,
Yes.
like people need to go to the autismdad.com. We put it up on the screen, but go to the Autism Dad and I'm just looking for the banner.
Take a look.
There it is. Take a look, because it's a lot of information. It's really well done. Considering you do it all yourself, you're so humble. It's kind of disgusting, but you really have done an amazing job. You know, I don't care what you say. I couldn't do this. Sometimes Shawn will call me and go, "Hey, do we have a topic today?" And I'm like, I like that's our preparation sometimes. Not true, people. We actually do have a plan, but the fact that you do all this on your own I'm amazed and blown away, because you're a single dad of 3 children that have, that are on the autism spectrum on top of everything else, and you don't make a living out of this. You actually have like a career, right? You have.
Yeah, a budding career, we'll say. It's use that
right.
loosely, but. Yeah, I did. I started just getting like people wanted sponsored, because you build a platform that has a larger following, and then it becomes, valuable to advertising and marketing and stuff like that. And like, I don't sell people's information or anything like that, because like I'm very weird about monetizing any of this stuff, because I feel like it compromises the integrity, which is why I didn't do it for the longest time.
Agreed.
But people share sponsored. They want to publish a post on my website or something like that, and I really don't do that very often anymore. But it starts out like that, or people want you to link to their article, which is like a similar topic, so it it works. It's just information. To like the podcast, which is really where things kind of took off more, I think, because people want to. They want their information in front of a very targeted audience, and I have a very targeted audience, and I'm very careful who I work with. I vet everybody that I work, which makes it frustrating, because like you leave so much money on the table, right? Because there are so many people out there who are like they prey on desperate parents, and so I work with a smaller pool of people, because I know who they are. And I've either used what they're doing on my own, or I've established some kind of like relationship with them where I know them more on a personal level, and I feel comfortable that what they're doing is, legitimate, and I would recommend it to like my family and friends. Those are the people that I'll accept like sponsorships from, and and run ads and stuff. And so, and then it's led to like consulting. I started doing consulting. People ask me to, feedback and helping to develop things that are relatable to people in my situation, and so I can help to reach people who can benefit from whatever it is that they're, whatever it is they're doing. And it's not always pretty, and it is a work in progress, but I was in survival mode for 20 years, and it feels like that. Dealing with depression and, it was hard to climb out of that. And a lot of people are still stuck in that, and, so like I'm 43 years old. I'm not where I should be, like for a typical 43-year-old financially, or really anything like that. But the reality is, and the reason like I'm not ashamed about that is because I know what I've had to get through to get where I am right now. And rather than focus on where I still need to be or where I should be, I look behind me and I see how far I've come just in the last 2 years, and the business is growing rapidly, and one person problem, like trying to keep up with stuff and stay on top of everything. And right, I did all of this not realizing that I had ADHD. So a lot of the challenges that I had with like follow through and it's all attention stuff. It's not hyperactivity or impulsiveness, but I've been at a deficit, and I've managed to sort of get to where I am right now. And now that I'm addressing that, it's gonna make me dangerous, guys.
I think it's inspirational, Rob, honestly, the fact that you've acknowledged that you've got some limitations. And again, the result that people see, not knowing much about you and your story, but I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, it really is. You've done an amazing job. And so, we're glad to have you on the program, just because you're doing such great service to folks who have been searching this out for 10 years, right? Trying to figure out, how do I get answers to my situation? And then your blog and your podcast and your social media is just another extension of a resource that people can find.
Well, and I just want to say this too, because most people, your audience may not have even seen any of this, but when we first had Shawn and I had our first meeting, and we had a conversation that I think we were supposed to talk for like 15 minutes or something like that. I don't remember. And we ended up having this like really deep conversation, and I can't remember. I don't remember yesterday, but like, I can't remember exactly what it was about, but like, I was in a really, like, honestly, I was going into this meeting thinking like, man, I'm just not like in a place to do this today. And I walked away after talking to you feeling so much better about my life. And I even like, I was like I got pretty emotional about it, because I did a reel, and I was like, hey, like, I just want you to know that like you made like a difference in my life that day. Like, you helped me to find a path forward,
So,
and so never underestimate the impact that you guys have. It doesn't matter how long you've been around, it's words have impact.
That means everything. That means everything. And that's what this is all about. That's what you do. That's what we do. That's our responsibility to each other on the planet. And it falls in line with what you were saying earlier. You're talking about the monetization. We went through the same thing, which is like money in this, just keep that separate. And it's still not why you do it, but there isn't a problem with monetizing value. There's a problem with accepting money where you don't add any value to anything.
You're exploiting people.
Right. So it's not a problem with monetizing. It's like, how do you do that? So if you sit back and go, how can I actually earn money, for the time that I put in doing X, without compromising what I'm giving, or compromise, there's ways to do that. And if you step forth, as we all have, which is, let me give what I give first and foremost, without thinking of getting anything back, and just give, the other things take care of themselves. Businesses come about, and so too does opportunity. Yeah. And as we always say, but today I think we might have set a record, but it's all perception. Mm-hmm. I think we've set a record for how fast an hour can go by today, because it just seems like, because that sounds redundant, because it's still an hour. But when you talk about how quickly the journey seems to have passed today, it seems like we got started 2 minutes ago, and we're at the point where I asked the question we generally do. Brian, I don't know if you want to give a lead in before I go with the question.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, it's a good question. It really, if I tell myself over and over and over again, it's a really good question.
Did you hear what he said though? Did you hear what Rob said? He said, "I've heard this story." He knows.
I've heard the story. I know it's coming. I don't remember the question, but I know what's coming.
Go ahead, Shawn.
Well, the question is with context, as Brian always says, and the context is important. Look, our ability to change the world is tied, no matter how great or small, by our willingness or ability to change ourselves, right? And that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, give us one example of a belief that you once really felt strongly about that you no longer believe to be true.
Well, okay. I'll be really honest about this. Okay. Right. That's a surprise. What? I was raised very Catholic, right? And in the Catholic schools and grade school and high school. And you were raised, and not so much by my parents. Well, not really at all by my parents, but just the church itself at the time was very very discriminatory and very closed-minded, and judgmental. And one of the things that I learned along this path has been just how amazing diversity is, and how lucky we are that people are as different as they are, because everybody brings something special to the world. And I wish the younger me would have known that, or recognized that, or just not been so blindly loyal to something that I didn't see things for myself. I just saw it through the lens of what I was told to think. And again, not by my parents, just teachers in school, and you know what I mean? Like they just pound on certain things. And I've realized how wrong that is, and as much as we can want autism acceptance or whatever, but it's not going to matter if we don't accept if we just accept everybody, period. Being different,
Totally
whether it's whatever it is, right? Then we don't need an Autism Awareness Month, or we don't need whatever awareness month, because everybody is just accepting themselves and others as humans. And I even get on the autism community because like we cannot expect the world to be accepting of our kids if we are intolerant of
each other,
or kids, kids who are different. Like we have to be accepting universally in order for it to really take root anywhere. And so I guess that's probably that's the lesson that I've.
That's fantastic. I've always said that the grace that we need to give, the grace that we seek. Yeah. That's what we need to do.
Lead by example.
Well, absolutely. And it feeds into generally how we close the show every episode. I always say, empathy and love is so needed. If you look at somebody's situation and you don't really understand what's going on, have some empathy. Yeah. You don't know what their situation, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know their story until you know their story. And you don't have to be empathetic.
Be a good human.
Be a good human.
Be a good human. It's not that hard.
Totally. And if you can look at the world through the lenses of love, the world's a better place.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Rob, for being a guest on today's
Thanks for having me, guys. This was awesome.
Yeah, it's been a joy. And again, it went by really fast. Thanks to all of our listeners, our viewers on Facebook and YouTube, and our listeners on our podcast and down at WSTX AM radio. And so to close us out, I'm going to throw it over to Shawn to finish up our episode. It's been an amazing conversation, Rob. Thank you so much. Shawn.
I want to thank Rob as well. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in. I want to thank, as always, the women in my life without whom I could not be. And that is my amazing mom, Jan, my amazing wife, Laura. And just remember, again, questions are more powerful than statements, right? Let's ask questions and be a little more curious and a lot less judgmental, more childlike and less childish. And remember that people need to be seen, need to be heard, need to know that they matter, need to know that they're loved. And that goes for everybody, even the bullies of the earth, any and everybody. And matter of fact, because they haven't been seen or heard is why they're bullies. So let's make sure that we take care of each other. If you're watching this, if you're listening to us, wherever you are, we love you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Shawn Hall in Hawaii, for constantly filling up our chat with links to all the stuff that you mentioned, Rob. So all the links are on our site, and they'll be on the YouTube. Shawn Hall, we love you. We love you dearly, man. Thanks for keeping us on track. Thank you again, Rob. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time on Just Two Dads. Oh my God, I almost forgot to play the